Right now, people are injecting themselves with peptides they ordered online from unregulated factories. Not junkies, not bodybuilders, software engineers, startup founders, people who optimize everything: their sleep, their diet, their calendars, and who decided that the next frontier is injectable biology. And here is the thing that makes this story complicated. The science behind some of these compounds is genuinely extraordinary. We are talking about molecules backed by the most rigorous clinical trials in modern pharmacology. But the way people are getting them, that is where this falls apart. I went through the peer-reviewed data, randomized controlled trials, meta-analyses, systematic reviews, and what I found is a story with two halves that do not match. If this is your first time here, I am Marcus. I read the science so you do not have to wade through the noise. Subscribe if you want this kind of breakdown regularly. All the studies I reference are linked in the description. Go check them yourself. Let me explain what is actually happening. Peptides are short chains of amino acids. Think of them as tiny protein fragments, signaling molecules that tell your body to do things: build tissue, release hormones, reduce inflammation. Your body already makes thousands of them. The explosion started with one specific class, GLP-1 receptor agonists. You know them by their brand names: Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro. These are peptide-based drugs that mimic a gut hormone called glucagon-like peptide 1. They slow gastric emptying, they reduce appetite, and they improve insulin sensitivity. And the clinical data on these is not ambiguous. A 2024 network meta-analysis published in the BMJ, 76 randomized controlled trials, nearly 40,000 participants, found that tirzepatide reduced hemoglobin A1C more than any other GLP-1 drug. It was also the most effective for weight loss, roughly 8.5 kilograms more than placebo. But it gets bigger. A separate 2024 network meta-analysis in metabolism, 27 trials, over 15,000 patients without diabetes, found that retatrutide, a newer triple agonist, produced 22% body weight loss in 48 weeks. These are extraordinary numbers. Nothing in the history of obesity pharmacology comes close, and the benefits go beyond weight. A 2025 meta-analysis in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, 21 trials, nearly 100,000 patients, found that GLP-1 drugs reduced all-cause death by 12%, cardiovascular death by 13%, and major adverse cardiovascular events by 13%, with high certainty of evidence. So, the approved, regulated versions of these compounds, the science is settled. They work. Impressively. But that success created something dangerous. The success of Ozempic and Mounjaro created what I would call a halo effect. People saw what semaglutide could do and started asking, what else is out there? What other peptides exist that nobody is talking about? And that question opened a door into a completely different world. The peptide that everyone in biohacking circles is talking about is called BPC-157, Body Protection Compound. It is a 15 amino acid sequence originally isolated from human gastric juice. And in preclinical research, meaning animal studies, it looks remarkable. A 2025 systematic review in the HSS journal examined the entire body of BPC-157 literature, 544 articles spanning from 1993 to 2024. They found 35 preclinical studies and exactly one clinical study. The preclinical work, all in rodent models, shows enhanced tissue repair, reduced inflammation, improved tendon and ligament healing, and neuroprotective effects. A 2019 review in Cell and Tissue Research concluded that BPC-157 demonstrated, quote, consistently positive and prompt healing effects across multiple injury types and soft tissues. But, and this is a big but, that single clinical study was a retrospective review of 12 patients with chronic knee pain. 7 of 12 reported relief lasting more than 6 months. No control group, no blinding, no randomization. Level 4 evidence, which, for those keeping score, is one step above an anecdote. The same HSS Journal review explicitly warned about, quote, "What were ye effects possible due to unregulated manufacturing, contamination, or unknown clinical safety?" They found 0 clinical safety data for BPC 157. Let me say that again. 0 clinical safety data in humans for a compound people are injecting into their bodies. Now, here is the part of the story that people miss. Even the approved GLP-1 drugs have trade-offs that the hype machine ignores. A 2024 systematic review and network meta-analysis in metabolism, 22 trials, over 2,000 participants, found that lean mass loss comprised approximately 25% of total weight loss on GLP-1 drugs. The most potent compounds, tirzepatide at 15 milligrams and semaglutide at 2.4 milligrams, were the most effective for fat loss, but among the least effective at preserving lean mass. And if you stop taking them? A 2025 systematic review in obesity reviews, 8 randomized controlled trials, found that participants taking semaglutide or tirzepatide regained an average of 9.7 kilograms after discontinuation. Weight regain was proportional to the original weight loss. So even the well-studied, FDA-approved compounds have nuances that require medical supervision. Imagine what happens when you take an unstudied compound with no clinical data from a source you cannot verify. Which brings us to the supply chain. There is a concept that almost nobody in the biohacking community understands, and it is this: purity is not safety. When someone sends a gray market peptide to a testing lab, and yes, there are now entire businesses built around this. They run what is called an HPLC test, high-performance liquid chromatography. It tells you, is the molecule in this vial actually what the label says? And it gives you a percentage, 99%, 99.5%. And people see that number and they feel safe. They should not. Because HPLC only detects proteins. It answers one question: what percentage of the proteins present are the labeled peptide? What it does not detect are endotoxins, bacterial toxins left over from contaminated manufacturing environments. These are lipopolysaccharides, fragments of dead bacteria that can trigger massive inflammatory responses in the human body. We are talking fever, septic shock, in extreme cases, organ failure. A vial can test 99.9% pure and still be loaded with endotoxins because the test simply does not measure them. Now, this contamination problem is not unique to peptides. A 2017 review in Sports Health examined the dietary supplement industry broadly and found that poor manufacturing processes and intentional contamination with banned substances, quote, continue to occur in dietary supplements sold in the United States. Weight loss and muscle-building products were the most likely to be contaminated. A 2022 systematic review in Biomed Research International analyzed over 3,000 dietary supplements and found that more than 28% contained undeclared substances. Think about that. More than 1 in 4 supplements had things in them that weren't on the label. And those are oral supplements, pills and powders subject to at least basic regulatory oversight. Now, imagine the same manufacturing quality problems, but with injectable compounds sourced from unregulated factories, labeled research use only to bypass FDA requirements. That research use only label is a legal fiction. It exists so the manufacturer can say, "We never told you to inject this." the liability shifts entirely to you. So here is where I land. The biology is real. The supply chain is a gamble. GLP-1 receptor agonists, semaglutide, tirzepatide. These are among the most rigorously studied drugs in modern medicine. Dozens of randomized controlled trials, tens of thousands of participants, consistent, reproducible results, cardiovascular benefits. If you are using these through a doctor with a prescription from a licensed pharmacy, the evidence is overwhelmingly in your favor. But the moment you step outside that system, the moment you order a vial labeled research use only from an unregulated supplier, you are no longer biohacking. You are gambling with your bloodstream. BPC 157. The preclinical data is genuinely fascinating. But right now, what you have is 30 years of animal studies and one retrospective case series of 12 people. No randomized controlled trials, no clinical safety data. That is not enough for me to inject something into my body, especially when I cannot verify what is actually in the vial. This is not a story about the science being fake. It is a story about the delivery mechanism being broken. The molecules may work. The supply chain is compromised. And purity testing does not tell you what you think it tells you. If you want to go deeper on the studies, every paper I mentioned is linked in the description below. I want you to read them. That is the whole point of what I do here. 3 things to take away. First, separate the proven from the experimental. GLP-1 drugs have massive, high-quality evidence. Most other peptides have rodent data and hope. Do not let the success of Ozempic convince you that every peptide on a Reddit forum is equally safe. Second, if you are interested in peptide therapy, get it through a doctor and a licensed pharmacy. Yes, it costs more. But the alternative is injecting an unverified substance from an unregulated factory. That is not optimization. That is roulette. Third, learn the difference between purity and safety. A 99% purity certificate tells you the molecule was correctly synthesized. It tells you nothing about endotoxin contamination, sterility, or whether the production environment was clean. Next week, I am looking at something that connects directly to this: the lean mass problem. When you lose weight on GLP-1 drugs, how much of that is muscle? And what can you actually do about it? The data is more nuanced than anyone is telling you. I am Marcus. This is The Correspondent. If this changed how you think about peptides, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe so you do not miss next week. I will see you then.